Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordan and welcome to part 2 of my October ARCs reading vlog. If you missed part 1, let me give you the quick version. I was approved for a whole bunch of books on NetGalley that all released in October, so I started reading them in September in order to get the reviews out by their publication dates. I had some really great luck with the first 4 books that I read in part 1, so I'm hoping to continue that luck on in this video, where I will be reading the second 4 advanced reader copies of books that come out in October, giving you my reviews and letting you know which ones you should pick up upon their release and which ones you might want to skip. The 4 books that I will be reading and reviewing in this video are The Quiet Room by Terry Miles. This is actually a sequel to a book called Rabbits. I really enjoyed this book when I read it last year, and I will give you more of my review of that book when I talk about this book, because obviously I won't be able to talk major spoilers since this one is a sequel, but very curious to find out my thoughts on this one. This is kind of a sci-fi book that releases on October 3rd. Then we have Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead, which might be my most anticipated out of all of the books that I'm reading for this video. Ashley Winstead has written, I think, 4 books before this one, and I've read 3 of them. I've generally enjoyed all of them, but she fascinates me as an author because she writes in so many different genres, and from what I've heard, this one is no different. I think it's more along the lines of mystery thriller, but I think it's more like gothic, almost horror or something like that. So very curious to find out what I think. That one also releases on October 3rd. Then we have Hookshot by Kennedy Ryan. This is actually not a brand new book. This book series has already been released, but they are all getting new covers, and so I believe that's why they were put back onto NetGalley. This is the 3rd book in the series. I've already read the first 2, so we are just rounding it out. This is a sports romance. The male love interests are all basketball players. I'm not sure how this 3rd book connects to those first 2, but I'll let you know. But that re-release of this book with the new cover comes out on October 10th. And then the last book for this video is called Dragged to the Wedding by Andrew Gray. I believe this is an LGBTQ contemporary book. I'm not sure if there's romance involved, but I think it has to do with drag queens. I'm excited about it. This one comes out on the 17th. So I am just going to get right into reading these books. The way I do these ARC videos is I don't do like midway updates or anything. There's just too much to talk about for each of these books. I would be here for an hour if I did midway updates every time I had thoughts. So instead I come back once I've finished a book and I give you the full spiel. I give you the synopsis, I give you my review, I tell you if I would recommend it or who I would recommend it to, and then we just keep it moving. Because we are approaching release for some of these books, I think I'm going to start with the 2 books that do come out on October 3rd. And I can tell you that I am already partway through Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead. So that will be the first book that I come back to you with an update on, hopefully later today. I'm trying to finish it today. So I will see you with a review on that first book. Okay, I just finished Midnight is the Darkest Hour, and this book has me reeling a little bit. The ending of it is a great ending. It's one that people are going to want to discuss, I think. There is a conversation with the author at the back of the book too that I read through and really enjoyed, and that has left me with like a stronger positive feeling about the book. But my gosh, what a ride. Okay, let me back up and give you a synopsis of this book, which is going to be a little bit difficult. Firstly, it's about this main character named Ruth, who is the daughter of the preacher in this small southern town. And this whole town is extremely religious, and they basically hold up this pastor as the most important and powerful man in town. And because of that, Ruth, the main character, has grown up privileged and very sheltered and kind of naive about what's going on in the world, but also she has a lot of strange conflicting feelings about the church and her religion, and that is especially kind of exacerbated with her relationship with this guy named Everett, who is also from that small town, but he is basically the opposite in that his dad is basically like the town drunk. Nobody really likes him, and they claim that he is the devil or a devil worshiper, and so Everett is basically the spawn of the devil, so they are very strongly outcast. And it's interesting that those 2 main characters are kind of brought together because they're both kind of outcasts, but for opposite reasons. The reason Ruth is an outcast is because nobody wants to talk to her because they are so afraid of her father and her family's power in the town, and they don't want to do anything with her that would get her to like tell on them to her dad, or that would send them to hell, or like anything like that. So she's an outcast, Everett's an outcast. They get to know each other, and it goes from there. We follow these characters for several years, kind of. It's not linear. This book flashes back between the now timeline, which is when they are something like 21 or something years old. They're a little bit older. They're young adults, but then it also flashes back to when they're 17 years old, 18 years old, 19 years old. And we learn that these two main characters have secrets that they're holding together, and it's just about how that develops through the town. I feel like I'm not even sure if that is the synopsis that the actual book would give. Let me see what Goodreads says. Oh yeah, okay. From this author comes a gothic southern thriller about a killer haunting a small town, Louisiana town, where two outcasts, the preacher's daughter and the boy from the wrong side of the tracks, hold the key to uncovering the truth. Okay, yeah, I feel like I basically said that. They're learning things about the past of this town, and yeah, I really liked it. This book is not going to be for everyone, for sure. First of all of the religion talk in here is probably going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. It does not paint religion in a good light. There is a lot of talk about what is right in the sense of lawfulness and holiness or godliness, and then like just general morality. Like, how are those three things different from each other, and how does this town view things that are good and bad versus what critical thinkers think are good and bad? So there's that, and no matter where you fall on that kind of spectrum of religious to not religious, I think people will enjoy or not enjoy this book based on how much they want that in their books. I like that critical discussion, so I enjoyed those elements. The romance in here was probably my favorite part. I really liked Ruth and Ever. Mostly I liked him. I don't know, there's something about just like a troubled male love interest that works for me. That part of the story reminded me a lot of It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, which is gonna turn some people off, but let me just say it's not like that in a lot of ways. It's way, way darker, but both of these characters are basically trying to stop the cycles of abuse that they've grown up with, and the way their relationship develops through that reminded me a lot of It Ends With Us. But also this book reminded me of Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, because it is set in a small southern town, and there's a lot of like swamp land talk and like nature talk, kind of. I guess not a lot, not as much as Crawdads, but there's a little bit of that element, especially at the beginning of the book. So it reminded me of that. Plus there is like the murder mystery element of that book, but also it reminded me of The Burning Girls by CJ Tudor, which is more of the like religious thriller. But I don't want to say religious because it's not pro-religion. I don't know. It's like those three books mashed into one, darker and grittier than all of them. I don't know how Ashley Winstead does what she does, not only in this book in combining all of those elements, but just her backlist of books in general. She spans so many different genres and tones and types of stories that it's crazy that she has such success, in my opinion, because the books are so different. I would say this is most like The Last Housewife because it is darker and covers some more controversial topics, but she also writes contemporary romance. She also has written more of like a dark academia mystery thriller. So she spans the gambit, and I think this is my favorite. No, I know this is my favorite Ashley Winstead book I've read so far. I'm interested to see what the reception is of this one, because it's so different and I don't really know how it's being pitched to the audience, if it's being pitched to existing Ashley Winstead fans or if it's trying to find a new audience. I don't know. I don't know how I would market this book if I were on the publishing team. I don't know. All I know is that I really liked it. I hope other people like it. It feels like it was out of my comfort zone, but I'm glad I went into it not really having any expectations because I was just along for the ride. I will also mention that I read this book primarily on NetGalley, but while I was reading it, it did become available to me through Libro FM in their ALC program. So I did try the audiobook out a little bit. I didn't love the audiobook narrator. I feel like her acting was trying to make the main character Ruth sound even more kind of naive and innocent than I was picturing her. So the way she voiced it just didn't really work for me. It wasn't terrible, but I definitely preferred reading this book with my eyes than to listening to it with my ears. So that's kind of my recommendation there. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm kind of waffling between a 4-star and a 5-star. I think I'm gonna give it 5 stars. I think the more I sit with this book, I think it's only going to get stronger in my rating of it, if that makes sense. I don't know. I can foresee why people are going to have critiques of it, and I think that's fine. And I think I will be able to agree with their points, but say that I liked those elements of it. But overall, I just liked it. I liked the characters, I liked the story, I liked the ending. I liked it. So I'm giving it 5 stars. I'm excited to review it. I'm excited for it to be out, and I'm interested to hear what other people think of it. So now I am going to get into the other book that releases on the 3rd. What's it called? The Quiet Room or something like that. So I will be back once I have finished that book and can give you my next review. All right, I just finished The Quiet Room by Terry Miles. I thought this one was going to be difficult to talk about in this video because it is actually the sequel to a book called Rabbits, which is a sci-fi book about this alternate reality game that people can play. It's very secretive. It involves like noticing inconsistencies or strange patterns that happen in life and kind of following them as if they're clues, sometimes solving puzzles or riddles. And if you end up being the winner, you gain some prize that's a little bit unknown, whether it's wealth or power or employment with like the FBI. It's very secretive, but it's very coveted. And the game of Rabbits is kind of like an underground community, the players of Rabbits, where you can like say code words and people will know that you're playing the game and you can help each other out or whatever. That's what the first book is about. We're following this main character named Kay, and they are playing like the 11th iteration of this game. And the second book, The Quiet Room, is a sequel. It takes place after this first book, but we're following different characters. Kay is actually not in the second book at all, and it's basically just another round of the game. So that's why it's not really spoilery to talk about the plot of the second book, because it's different, but it's more of the same, if that makes sense. A lot of what I liked about this second book is the same as what I enjoyed in the first book. The idea of rabbits and the game and the things they have to solve to go through the game are so much fun to read. I am the type of person who loves escape rooms. I love games. I love riddles and logic puzzles and all of those things. So the idea of like this very secretive, kind of elite real life game is very intriguing to me. So I love reading about the characters solving those clues. I think I enjoyed the characters a little bit more in this second book. We don't just follow one main character in the second book, we follow multiple perspectives. They sometimes end up in different places doing different things, and I liked reading about where everyone was. And then my problems with this second book are also similar to my problems in the first book, in that the science doesn't really science. It doesn't really make sense. And it's kind of like the author is just making it confusing in order to make it confusing. And in the second book especially, just the like scope that it goes to is so unrealistic, like more unrealistic than it is on the surface, knowing it's a fictional sci-fi type game. But it's like the highest possible stakes are what this group is trying to fend off, like literally the end of the world, and not just the end of the world in this reality, but all of the alternate realities are at stake and in the hands of these very few characters. I don't know why, but that for some reason to me makes it less realistic, like I said, but I also get less invested when the stakes are that high. I think I would rather have the plot be a little bit more immediate and relevant to the characters and not just like saving the world. That feels a little bit too superhero to me. So while I enjoyed the characters, I wasn't completely bought into what they were doing. And then I guess my last kind of gripe about this book, or the reason I'm ultimately going to rate it 3 stars instead of 4 stars, is because it just felt less novel this time around. It felt less original. It wasn't blowing my mind with the overall concept because I had already read it before. And I think it would have really had to do something else different or special or more satisfying if it were going to overtake the first book in my mind, and it didn't do that. So ultimately I'm glad I read it. I would recommend it to fans of the first book, with the understanding that it's not going to be better than the first book. It's just more of the same of the first book. So yeah, glad I read it. Probably will not be getting a physical copy of the book. I do think the sequel's book cover is cool, but I'm in love with the book cover of this first one. So I'll keep this one, probably pass on the second one. And if nothing else, hopefully it's at least a general recommendation for this first book, Rabbits. There is also a podcast associated with this world. The podcast did come first, and it's following a whole different set of characters who are in this world of rabbits, playing this game and seeing where it takes them. So maybe if you're more of a podcast person, you could try out that podcast. If you really fall in love with it, you could read the first book. And if you just need more, you could read the second book. And that book did come out on October 3rd. So if you've read the first one and are interested in the second one, you can check it out. But now I will be getting to my third book for this video. I have actually already started Hookshot, which by Kennedy Ryan is the next book that I'll be reading for this video. I should finish it shortly, and we'll be back with my final review of that one once I'm done. Alrighty, I just finished Hookshot by Kennedy Ryan, and man, this book was a lot. I love Kennedy Ryan. She knows how to write an emotional romance. And it's funny, as I was reading this book, I was around the halfway mark and I was like, I don't know, this isn't really hitting like other Kennedy Ryan books have hit. Like, some things are emotional, but it really wasn't going there. And then like right after I had that thought, it went there. This is an emotional book for sure. The plot of this book is we are following a woman named Lotus and a man named Keenan. Keenan is a basketball player. He plays with, what's his name, August from the first book. They are teammates, and Iris, who is the woman from the first book, is the cousin of Lotus in this book. And then for the second book, Banner is the female main character. She is the agent of Keenan in this third book. So they're very much intertwined, though on Goodreads, Kennedy Ryan says this can be read as a standalone. And I do think that's true. Other than just kind of mentioning those other characters, there's really not a lot in this book that has to do with the plots of those two other books. But anyway, our two main characters meet in this book, and Keenan is divorced and has a daughter who's around 14 years old. So he's got a lot going on with his ex-wife. Their relationship is not great. They've been divorced for a couple years, and yet the wife can't seem to let go. So Keenan feels like he's walking on eggshells. He's also trying to balance, like, when does he introduce his daughter to a new girl in his life? All of that, loved that. I love romances that deal with people with children. And then Lotus, her story is at the beginning of this book, she's talking to her friends and she's basically telling them, like, I'm done with sex for a while. It's clear from the beginning that she has some kind of trauma from her past that has led to a less than healthy relationship with sex. And of course, right after she says that, she meets Keenan. They have an instant connection, but she's determined to take it slow. So based off that synopsis, it's nothing groundbreaking or earth-shattering. Pretty typical romance setup in my opinion. But man, Kennedy Ryan just rips on your heartstrings. There are content warnings in this book for sexual assault, toxic parental relationships, substance abuse, and a suicide attempt by someone who's not one of the two main characters. So definitely proceed with caution if any of those could be harmful for you to read. But overall, I recommend this book. I don't think I quite liked it as much as the first book in this series. I think that first one is my favorite. I rated that one 5 stars. This one is my second favorite. I did rate it 4 stars. And then Blackshot is the second book. That is by far my least favorite. I think I gave that one either 2 or 3 stars. So did not love it, but I'm really glad that this third book kind of redeemed that second book in this this series. Mostly it's because I loved this female main character. She is so strong. She knows what she wants. She knows what she needs. There are a couple times in this book where Keenan is being kind of an a-hole and Lotus is not afraid to put him in his place, not only to protect herself from what he's doing to her, but also like she is looking out for his daughter because Lotus had a very not good relationship with her mother. She's extra sensitive to what Keenan's daughter might be going through with the turmoil with her parents. So she's looking out for that girl in the way that she never had someone looking out for her. And I loved that. So yeah, 4 stars, really enjoyed it. Glad to have read this series, finished it out strong, and I would recommend it to anyone who has read Kennedy Ryan before and enjoyed her, or if you haven't read Kennedy Ryan but you like emotional romance books, I would actually most closely compare Kennedy Ryan to Colleen Hoover because they just punch you in the face with those emotional topics. So if that's what you're looking for, do recommend, and I'm glad to have read it. And I think you can get your hands on these new covers at some point in October. So with that, I only have one more book left to read for this video, so I will be back once I have finished Dragged to the Wedding. I'll give you that book's full synopsis and let you know my final thoughts on that final book. All right, is this the exact same spot I did my last update? I think it might have been. We are going to roll with it. I have my final update for this video. It's not a great one. I started the last book. I started Dragged to the Wedding by Andrew Gray. I am unfortunately deciding to DNF it. And pretty early on, I'm only about 20% into the ebook. I think it's pretty clear that this book is not for me. And had I not been sucked in by the cover and the premise and just taken a minute to do a little bit more research, I think I could have figured out that it wasn't for me before requesting it. Let me give you the synopsis first of all, because I was intrigued by this story. We follow this gay man named James, I think, who is a cop, and he's gay. He's out as gay, but he's not out to his family. And his entire family lives in Montana, which is my neighbor state. I know it fairly well. And his sister is getting married. He's going back for the wedding, and he was intending to bring one of his friends as a date, his female friends, to pretend that he's straight, but that falls through, so now he's desperately looking for someone else to take to this family wedding, and he wants it to be a woman. His friend ends up setting him up with this person who he initially meets. He thinks it's a woman. He later finds out that it's a man who does drag. And the plan is to take that man with him to his family's wedding and have him be in drag that entire time and trick his family into thinking it's a woman. Honestly, an intriguing premise. The drag world is not a world that I have a lot of knowledge or experience about, so I was interested to get a little bit of insight into that culture and just have interesting conversations. However, I could tell right when starting this book that I probably wasn't going to get that. Off the bat, the writing of this book is very simple. Like, the conversations that are happening are just so basic. It felt kind of juvenile and like how a younger person would write a book. I don't know how to say that in a way that's not offensive. I don't mean it to be offensive. I just mean I can tell not a lot of time was spent crafting this book. And after a little bit more research on this author, he appears to be the type of author who just pumps out the books. It looks like he writes primarily, if not exclusively, male-male romances, a lot of different series, but for example, including this book, this will be his 3rd book published in 2023. He had 9 books showing up on Goodreads as published in 2022, and overall his Goodreads is showing as having 227 distinct works. And I am not knocking that as a career path. I know that there are authors in all genres who just are in a routine of writing books really quickly, publishing them, moving on to the next one, and basically creating a pipeline of readers that way who just never run out of their books to read. That's unfortunately not the type of book that I like to read. I much prefer books that spend a lot of time digging into a topic, discussing the nuance, and just taking care in what they're writing. And I just don't think that's possible when you're publishing between 3 and 9 books in a single year. I'm not a writer, so take this with a grain of salt. And again, I'm not knocking this author for how he publishes books. I know it's probably profitable for them, but for those reasons, I didn't want to finish this book because I don't think it's going to be satisfying for me. I've also looked at a number of Goodreads reviews. Most of them at this point, obviously they're also all other early reviews, but a lot of them say they were disappointed and there's not a lot of actual character development. They agree that this premise is very unrealistic, which I wasn't really sure what to think about that. I don't think I know enough about drag queens to have that kind of opinion of whether or not someone would be able to trick someone else's family into thinking they're a woman when they're a man in drag. So I don't know, it's, again, none of that is making me DNF the book. It's the fact that I didn't like the writing. I didn't like the initial kind of surface level introduction we were getting to this whole story and the characters. It's also a very, very short book to begin with, less than 200 pages. I just don't think it's gonna give me what I want it to give me, and instead of giving it a bad rating, I think I can actually just provide feedback on what I read so far and hopefully steer it towards its intended audience without bringing down the average rating because there are so few reviews on it. I don't know, a very weird conclusion to this video. But to wrap it up, I definitely had a variety of experiences with these books. I guess if I were going to rank and recommend them, at the bottom would unfortunately be Dragged to the Wedding by Andrew Gray. This does come out on October 17th. I DNF'd it, but that doesn't mean nobody else will enjoy it. Then above that, with a 3-star rating, I have The Quiet Room by Terry Miles. Just above that is Hookshot. Definitely enjoyed this. Glad to have read it. It rounded out the series nicely. The new version of this cover, and I think the entire series, comes out on October 10th. So keep an eye out and get your hands on that if you're interested. And then the winner of this video, my 5-star book, such a pleasant surprise, is Midnight is the Darkest Hour. This book is now out. I'm excited for it to get into other readers' hands. I know it's a book club pick for a couple of BookTube book clubs, most notably Jessie from Reading with Jess, one of my good friends. They are discussing this in November, and I cannot wait to have more people read it so I can talk about it with them, and hoping that the reception is good for them like it is for me. But that is all I have for this video. Let me know if you are interested in picking any of these books up, if you have plans to, or if you're gonna wait on more reviews, or I convinced you not to pick something up. Just let me know. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.